designated some time today to remember and to honor and to have an appreciation of Peg Mason. And we've got an agenda with some folks that are talking, and so I want to be careful not to say too much and not to take anyone's thunder, but I guess if I have two things to say, it's this. One is that if you look at this photograph up here, that honors David and Peg Mason. You've got David and Peg, and of course Knox the dog. But it's not a photo of Dave. It's a photo of Dave and Peg. And I think anybody who has been here at camp and knows this place and was here with Dave and Peg knows that it was a true partnership with equals. And while Dave was amazing and an incredible human and upfront and was the one people saw and associated with this place, Peg was just as important as he was and was behind the scenes. And it's truly the two of them that made this place special for 40 or 50 years or the time that they ran it.
So, one of my best memories of Peg happened during Thanksgiving when we would gather and tease her. We'd be about 25 of us. And, of course, that was when Dave would put on his polka dot shirt and do the magic show. But Peg was the one who took care of us, in the Thanksgiving dinner. It was just an amazing time. But Peg was very efficient. So, after dinner, any turkey left over, she would cut it up and put it away. So that was really difficult for Sandy and myself because we wanted a turkey sandwich before we went to bed, and we have to go in the freezer to get the turkey. But one of my best times with Peg was after Dave died, and she was living over in Freiburg, and in her 90s, living in this house, but she had all this support from other family and from people from camp. But we would stop and see her usually on her way to and from camp. And, it was great. Vivi and I would stop and we'd be with her for a while. And, so one time we were here at camp, and so I called Peg and said, look, we're going to stop on our way back down to Boston. And she said, well, you have to be careful because they're fixing the road. And they were at 302, went through these big changes, they raised the level and did all the stuff. So she said, the driveway is different. I'm not sure you can find the driveway. And I said, well, I'm sure we can find it. So we drive over, and as we come around the corner, there's Peg sitting out at the end of the driveway on the road to make sure that we came in, got in the right place. And then one other time during the winter, we were going up the Sunday River where my daughter Sarah has a condominium, and we're going to ski and stuff. So it turned out it was a snowstorm. By the time we got to Freiburg, there was 6 inches of snow on the ground. We pulled into the driveway, and there's Peg out there shoveling the walk. So that night, we were going up the Sunday River, and Peg said, I don't think you ought to drive up there. There's a snowstorm, and why don't you stay here for the night? And I said, oh, no, we're fine. We can make it. So we got up there, and it turns out that the condo was up in the top level up on the mountain. So we couldn't make it up. We got stuck. We went back in and stayed in Bethel at the Bethel Inn. And so when I got back after that, I said, well, Peg, we couldn't get up the mountain. And she said, I told you so.
So nice to be back here at Agawam after many years of not being here, and so happy to see many familiar faces. Some I apologize, I can't put a name to. Others, I remember the face, and I remember many things that you did. That's your name to it, and I know what at least some of your activity was while you were here. I had an interesting experience preparing for this episode today. I've been writing down things as they came to my memory that I remembered from camp, and I left it on my desk. I didn't forget it, but my dog at home also like that list that I worked to make. And I discovered last night that I no longer had the list that I had spent time making so that it could sound reasonably intelligent speaking with you. So I kind of ad-libbed last night, stayed up late, tried to remember many of the things that I'd written down, but they're not in any sort of order that they had happened. They jump from a beginning to a middle to an end. So that's what you're going to hear a few things from me, and you're going to be saying, "What's wrong with that guy?" You know, this didn't happen then. It happened a long time before that. The reason they're out of order, I can blame on my job. And that's kind of a nice out. My job doesn't get back to me. I found that daily Peg wore many hats. Many days she was in the office before anybody was up at camp. And she was starting the first of her many jobs, none of which were assigned, but she always assumed something else had to be done. And rather than asking someone else to do it, Kate would do it herself. Well, one of those jobs was cleaning up the counselor room, which at that time was right next to her desk. There was a wall in between, but it was just a single frame wall, no insulation. So Peg was able to keep 1 year free of everything else going on to know what was really happening in camp. And the house was parked in that room. And Peg could keep a running story. She operated her single one-arm adding machine that I used to hear going so quickly I didn't know what button she would push it, but I could always hear that arm go. And it was going so fast I couldn't figure how she was typing in numbers. Well, the end result was we figured for so many years, Peg never got any recognition for the amount of work that she was responsible for. As Tony mentioned, you know, this was a together operation. Peg did behind the scenes. She knew everything that was going on in camp. You couldn't mention something without Peg already knowing and then telling you more that you didn't know. We decided that year that we were going to give her a gift. So the counselors kind of got together and made a decision that that little box adding machine that was about that size, it had an arm that you pulled down, had a little red handle where all the paint was worn off. That was in constant use, would be replaced by something electronic. So we made the big decision that we were going to update Peg's equipment in the office. And at the end of the year, we had a collection from the staff, and an added machine was purchased for Peg. We weren't at the calculator stage. This was the next step from Peg, manual machine. And when this was given to her, she opened the box and just looked at it, and for the first time, had nothing to say. Just stared at it as if to say, you know, why? I already have a machine that does this. But we tried to convey the information that we were moving ahead, and that maybe she could try this electric machine. Well, I found out from my experience working in the office that was one wall over from her, that she did a lot of studying by herself and hoping nobody saw her. I'd come in and there'd be nobody else in the office, and there'd be Peg with the instructions on the machine. And she'd be pushing buttons, and you could almost hear her saying, how does that work? So that machine paved the way so that instead of hearing a crank, we now heard a buzz with an electric motor, with an electric motor performing. Peg was always busy, no matter who came in the office or what they came for. She always had time to speak to that person, to help them if they had trouble, to understand what their situation was. And it was your time, even though her desk was piled high with bills of the day that she paid faithfully every day. You could almost schedule her daily procedure. Mornings, you'd be taking care of yesterday's bills that came in the mail. But she always had time to interrupt if something else came along. She wore many, many hats in the office. As a matter of fact, I believe she wore all the hats. From the storeroom, which was a oversized closet, Peg had uniforms that were rented, that campers who didn't have their own uniforms would be supplied uniforms through the office. Peg took care of that. And if you spoke with her, she knew what was on each shelf. Even though they were taken down every year, moved to level at camp, new names filled in, and then loaded back, taken back here, so that youngsters could be able to use them. That was one of her jobs. She considered that she was assigned in the office. Peg had no assignments. Her job was everything. And she was aware of everything that was going on. That one ear was never tuned into what Peg was doing. That one ear was always tuned in to what everybody else was doing. So that she thought it's something that Dave might want to be aware of. She would be the relay person. I don't know whether others discovered during this time that was a good way to get something to Dave if you really weren't sure about speaking. You speak loud enough so Kate would hear you, and it would be guaranteed if she thought it was important, Dave would know about it. First chance. a variety of responsibilities, even included on cookout nights in camp. She supplied the food and the transportation of that food from the kitchen to the individual cabins. This was a weekly event. She was more than just being responsible for the daily mail and paying bills. She made the office a functional place and a pleasant place to be. I know every time that I came into the office, I was always greeted with a smile. I don't believe she was laughing at me. But still,
Will do.
was greeted with a smile. And the offer was there to do anything that she could to help. No matter how busy she was always willing to help somebody else. And then she'd go back to what she was doing. I've never known her to not have something to do. No matter what she finished, there was always something else on the list. And if there was not specifically on that list, it was in her mind that we realized, I gotta do this, or somebody's got to do this. So if that somebody isn't gonna do it, I guess I'll have to. That was Peg's theory on many things. She worked alone in the office. During the summer, we'd have maybe one other person do some of the menial tasks that were involved in everyday atmosphere. And even though some of those responsibilities were taken away from Peg, she always had a list of things to do that was endless. No matter how successful she was never at the end of her list. And she was always willing to help somebody else. I think the only thing I could say was how they great and faithful service to Agawam.
By the blazing council fire's light, we have met in comradeship tonight, round about the whispering trees, guard our golden memories, and when tonight we close our eyes to sleep, let us pray that we will always keep Agawam's spirit strong and clear, till we meet again. By the blazing council fire's light, we have met in comradeship tonight, round about the whispering trees, guard our golden memories, and when tonight we close our eyes to sleep, let us pray that we will always keep Agawam's spirit strong and clear, till we meet again.
Good morning. I share a few stories about Peg. And as everyone knows, she was everybody's mom day in and day out. If Peg couldn't keep on the straight and narrow, Peg sure did. Early in the 80s, Peg was in charge of the front office at the Church and also the Bank of Agawam. Anyone looking for a little cash for a night out had to visit the bank for a withdrawal. Admiral Nash and I used to visit with Peg to request a withdrawal. And Peg, I'd like to withdraw $30 for the evening. Oh, Colonel, $30. What are you going to do with $30? Well, you know, we're persistent, and in the end, she gave us $30, and we went out and did what we did. At the end of the summer, we're saying our goodbyes, and the last step was to go to the office. And for a big check that we walked out at the end of the year, I'd like to pick up the balance of my salary check. Well, Colonel, with all those nights out with your friend Admiral, there's nothing left. And as a matter of fact, it was $150. And then during the reunions, you know, I was Dave had an elephant memory for names and faces. But over the years, I wasn't quite sure. And across the many reunions that Peg and Dave were greeting all the alums returning to camp, I'd always noticed Peg whispering Dave's name almost every time someone came up to see him. So in the end, I think Peg was probably the secret sauce of his outstanding memory. Back in 1971, my first year as a camper in Cargill, with Cap John Schmidt as the counselor, I heard something about collecting wild Maine blueberries and taking them to the office. So as a little kid, I ran around, I got my tin full, and I wandered up to the office, and Peg was very gracious and said, "Of course I'll bake a pie for you." A day later, I returned to the office, only to be greeted with a freshly formed baked blueberry pie. And the cabin at Cargill was never happier. And how can anyone beat that? It was just a Peg thing, right? And then for the last memory, I'm not sure if people remember this secret or not. I don't know if anybody knows Dave's nickname for Peg. But about 10 years ago, he let it slip at a reunion. We were in the dining hall for the camp off, and Tommy Bernard was sitting on one of those classic wood dining room tables you could only get at Agawam. After one, he said, "Dave, I'd love to get this signed." And Dave said, "Sure," with that huge smile on his face. And he looked over across at Peg at the nearby, and he started chanting, "Pegger, Pegger, Pegger," looking for the lifetime of the signature for Tommy Bernard. Peg looked over and she gave him one look, and all of a sudden the shaving stopped. and Dave said, "I guess you're not going to get that signature." Anyway, she'll be truly missed, right? I mean, a woman of few words, but a strong spirit, and clearly a guiding light for all of us. So, thank you.
Morning, everyone, and thank you all for coming. Like Chief said, I'm Swampy Will Shy. I was a main idea camper for 2014 and 2021, and full staff the past 2 years. Although, for all these titles, I was Billy Jack, a landscaper in Freiburg, along with my dad, who had the privilege to work for Dave and Peg, or Mr. and Mrs. Mason, as I refer to them. I never knew the Masons as camp directors, but even in my little town of Freiburg, the Mason family influence could be seen, specifically that of Peg Mason. They never failed to make it to every single basketball and football home game at Freiburg Academy, in which they would be recognized as Peg and her husband Dave. Put it into Agawam terms, in my 8-year-old eyes, if Dave was chief, then Peg was clearly the captain. If there was something she didn't like, she let you know, usually with a motherly, sarcastic comment. Although, what she said always came from a place of love and care. While working for her, she was outside almost as much as me and my father were. Whether it was to make sure me and my father were well fed with cookies and lemonade, or to make sure not a single blade of grass or scoop of mulch was out of place. It was obvious that she cared immensely about everything, from the tallest tree to the smallest weed. She showed this care in every aspect of life, a trait I learned from her and continue to try to express as best as I possibly can, both here at Agawam and back home in Freiburg. One memory I'll never be able to forget is a time when she invited me and my father inside for the usual cookies and lemonade. She brought out a tin of assorted Italian cookies, one that I had come accustomed to many times before in my own grandmother's place and other grandparents. And almost every time I encountered this cookie tin expecting treats, they were almost always filled up with knitting supplies. Miss Mason was different than everyone else, and when she opened said tin, it was full with homemade cookies. They could have been store-bought for all I knew, but it was the thought that counts. This is what I believe is a perfect example of just how sweet a person she truly was. Even when you least expected it, she had cookies. Although I'm very lucky to have the perspective that I do, I wanted to make sure while writing this I could truly do the name Peg Mason justice. I asked my dad what he remembered of Mrs. Mason, and in a simple response he stated, she loved Dave. The more I look back on my memories of the Mason family, the more I see how wonderful of a pairing they were, up until their house in Freiburg was empty. It was from them what I learned what true love looked like, and what a proper marriage could become. My life has changed forever when I finally got sponsored to be a main idea camper. Camp was the embodiment of the Mason family love that I had been experiencing for years, all wrapped into one, lost my place, getting a little teary-eyed, into one week-long journey. And they shared that with me, a lone gardener from North Freiburg. Not once did she ever ask for a thank you, nor did I have to apply and get to see if I was a good enough person. She gave me that opportunity simply because she could. That was who Miss Mason was. She inspired people through example and showed me that you could always do what your heart desires, even for your landscaper. She was a leader, a listener. She set high expectations and always had them met. And most of all, she was my favorite customer. Thank you.
I have many fond memories of Peg here at camp, but the majority of things I'm going to talk about here today are my memories of Dave and Peg at their home in Lovell and in Freiburg and at Agawam Pisa. It's ironic that I'm up here today because for the first 10 or so years I worked here at camp, I did not make announcements, I didn't public speak, I didn't get up in front of people and talk. You might find that hard to believe if you know me that. But that was always a big push with Peg. You know, she always said, oh God, you can do it, you can do it. You know, and of all people will be telling you that Peg, who hated to do his like But she was always very encouraging for me to do that and said, you know, it gets easier to do it and really, you know, pushed me to do it. So here I am today, and thank you, Peg, for helping me do this. When I think of Peg, there are some words I would use to describe her as quiet, unassuming, behind the scenes, organized, a teacher, thrifty, a great sense of humor, and a great sense of character. You know, Peg taught us a lot of things, and one of the things that I think about what Colonel had to say, Peg taught us about thinking about money that we spend and not to waste money. But if you remember those famous quotes, $10, what are you gonna do, get married? $20, what are you gonna do, buy a car? Do you really need that money? Can't you go to the candy closet 3 times today? She was so far ahead of her time. You know, when I think about other things she taught us not to be wasteful. And you think about the stuff that was in that storeroom that Major talked about. You know, anytime we needed anything, we never got a new piece of paper. We usually got Peter Mason's old school paper that she'd cut up and make scrap paper out of it, and he brought it over here. But in that closet, there was always cardboard, there was always string, old shoelaces, there were bread bags, Ziploc bags, things like that. Peg was recycling before recycling was cool. And you know, when I worked with Caesar, I mean, when we cooked, you know, we would always put the homemade bread in a bread bag that she had bought. We would use the bread ties that, you know, that she had saved. So she was way ahead of her time with that stuff, and I just think how much she taught me, especially about that stuff, but I think all of us, that, she taught, what to be thrifty and not to wait. After Dave died, I spent many, many hours alone with Peg, which basically was a lot of the time I spent with Peg. When I was cooking at Agawam Teaser, after Phil Miller died, it was just kind of Peg and I, and we would talk about things, and like I said, talk about teaching things, and the thousands of things we had, and a lot of good laughs. And you may or may not know over the years, there have been times that cooks have left here in the middle of summer, and we didn't have a cook, but Peg always managed to step in and do that. And I can remember her talking to me say, "This is a great thing for you to know, Cap. If anything ever happens at camp, you can always, go into the kitchen, you cook if you need to." And I thought, Peg, I can barely boil water. Here again today, I can do it. I've done it before. But I think of the things that, that Peg taught me how to make. And I've learned to love some of these things. If you were ever at Agawam Teaser, you remember some of the things. But, she taught me her Anadama bread, her homemade rolls, her Rice Krispie peanut butter treats with chocolate in the middle, her peanut butter balls. We made hundreds of chocolate chip cookies and hundreds of oatmeal cookies almost every week, between groups and stuff that came to Agawam Pizza. And the weekly menu was always the same. It was, baked chicken. We had a pan with pineapple, tater tots, pot roast, mashed potatoes, carrots, spaghetti with meatballs. Those were the things that we always had at Teaser. And the thing is, if there's anything left, you can always serve it next week. And that's one of the great things about that menu being the same. New group, same menu, and we sit and listen to things people said about Peg. We talk about the list. The list. David Peg had lists for everything. And there's something that we all should learn from, because things got done with those lists. I always said the day was never long enough to get the list done, but at least they had a list. And we'll tell you a funny story about one of the things that happened at Agawam Teaser, when I was working over there, but Dave had left the list for Peg and Phil Smith, who was the cook at the time. But one of the things, the molding had come off the edge of the pool table, and Dave left on the list for Peg and Phyllis to glue the molding back on the pool table. Well, I don't think that Peg had ever used super glue before. Because Peg got the glue out, and she was gluing the molding, I think, and she held it in place. When it was time to take her hands off, both hands were glued to the table. So Phyllis Millett came out of the kitchen to help, but she put her on. And they were both glued to the table. They were coming back from the mountain, and they were really in white a wreck because they didn't know what to do. We remember those two women stuck to that pool table. Really some funny things that happened. I think one of my favorite stories that I remember was the first summer that I worked here, full summer. We had a lower unit head and his wife that were here, and they didn't work out, and they got let go that day. And it was, of course, on a Wednesday. It was postcard day. And as Peg was collecting the postcards, one of the postcards said, "Dear Mom and Dad, the Amazon woman got thrown out of camp today." Peg looked at that and he goes, "I bet that one's going to get lost in the mail." It is. One of the stories I want to tell you about, we're talking about, things, one of the, last year's probably that Dave was doing the actual snow blowing and stuff at Freiburg, but he would snow blow the driveway and his back was bothering, so Peg decided she was going to learn how to use that snow blower, so that she could go up and do it and save him the effort. So Dave went out and showed her how to use the snow blower. But she fired it up and she started to go. He went in the house to sit at the desk and look out the window to see how Peg did. Well, when she got to the end of the driveway, I don't know if she got nervous, she forgot what to do, but she couldn't stop the thing. So she turned and headed up 302. Well, of course, Dave gave there, he had to grab his coat and hat, but he went scurrying up there, but she was quite a ways up. Before he got there, but needless to say, that was the last time Peg did any snowball. Over in Freiburg. After Dave passed, I really went over to check on Peg quite a bit and do things for her. But there was some of my best memories of Peg. I mean, we always talked about anything. I mean, we had a lot of good laughs. But she always had a little list of things for me to do. Whether we look at the computer, change a light bulb, move something, show how to do something on the TV. And then we would stroll around the yard looking at flowers and things like that and talk about our family and things. And it was just really great times, one-on-ones that I had with Peg. And, I really just so enjoyed the time. And almost every single time we ever went there, I couldn't leave until we went out to dinner. So every single time, we said, let's go out to dinner. So we would go. And it was just such fun times with Peg. And I really do miss her. And I just think of how lucky we all were that she was in our lives. Because she was behind the scenes, but she taught us all so much. And I just am so thankful that, I get to know them the way that I get to know them, different from a lot of them, in their home. And it was just such a wonderful, wonderful person to spend that.
There's a long, long trail of winding into the camp of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and the campfire gleams. There'll be long, long weeks of waiting until our dreams all come true. Till the day when I'll be going back to Agawam with you. There's a long, long trail of winding into the camp of my dreams, where the nightingales are singing and the campfire gleams. There'll be long, long weeks of waiting until our dreams all come true. Till the day when I'll be going back to Agawam with you.
So there are many people here today that had relationships with Peg in some way, shape, or form. And we'd like to open it now up to anyone who's got something that they would like to share. We've got some pre-selected folks, and then anyone else who would like to share, please let me know. We'll start with Admiral Peter Wilson.
We could fill an entire weekend and then some with stories about Peg, and each one of them better than the other. But everything that's been said here rings true with the character and the person that she was. One little anecdote would be that she would never attend council. And camp would be as dark as night before light. Yet up in the office, there was the light that hung over the top of the big wall with all the announcements and various things on it. And then this one little glowing lamp, which was one of those over-the-top spring-loaded lamps that sat above her desk, and there was Peg beautifully at her desk. And we used to ask her, why don't you come to council? Well, I've got things to do, Adam, I've got things to do. And, well, come on down sometime. Well, one year she was flied out of her chair and brought to council to participate in something. And Striper Cruiser Jim Mason was here that year, so we had a little help from one of her children. So that helped. So she sat dutifully there in the corner in council, listening and probably making notes and lists at the same time. And it came time for charades. And in comes one tribe, in comes another tribe, and Peg stands up and joins one of the tribes. She goes to the far end of the council choir, and the two tribes are over here. And of course the gate came in, the routine coming and going. And she just stood there, and these two tribes, bands, began some sort of contest. She looked into the contest, and she watched the contest, and she watched them back and forth. And then the dust settles and the contest stops. And then she walks over to the tribe on the left, and she walks out. And the other tribe on the other band on the other side is, now I can guess, they walk out lonely and quiet without Peg. Very disappointed. The whole thing's over. And the question becomes, well, what was the charade? It was a 3-syllable word done in one act. Anyone? Winnipeg.
I would also like to invite Bowman Scott.
So, as Colonel Summers mentioned, Peg was really, for many of us, our first financial planner. And unlike Colonel John Summers, I actually listened to Peg and took less money out. So when I left, I got a nice check at the end of my time. So, she was my real first finance planner. And as Hap was saying before, I had such a great relationship because I was really fortunate the last 7 or 8 years that Geezer was running. I got to work up there every weekend. I'd go up with the school groups, and the time that we spent, Peg and Dave and Pat and there was a woman named Kimberly Bryan who worked here a couple of summers, some of you may remember, and it was the best time. You do these things from these school groups who would come in, you get their food out, you get the kids to bed, and then we would all sit around that big kitchen table, if you had ever been to Agawam Geezer, and just sort of tell it over. And we'd spend half an hour telling stories, what happened today, just talking about whatever it was. And it was such a great feeling of family that I got spending my time at Agawam Geezer, and I really feel really fortunate that I was able to be included with that. I feel very fortunate that Chief Nelson allowed me to disappear 4 days a week to go work for the Masons while I was working for Agawam. So that was a really special part, and any of you who are Agawam Geezer people hopefully have that special connection. Another thing, Peg and Dave were great keeper of not only lists that people have talked about, but statistics. And so there's some great statistics that you can look at on one of the boards out there about the earliest snow, the largest group, all these different things. So it's kind of fun. But every day, Peg would be like, all right, what was the temperature? How much snow fell? How much wood did we bring in? And all those things she kept track of. It was really very, very interesting.
I met Dave and Peg Mason through the church in Lovell, and that I attended from pretty much since I could remember all the way up through. And near the end of my camper career, my father started getting busier at work, and it came to a point where I didn't know if I was going to come back for my final summer. And Dave and Peg, and specifically Peg, because Peg drove, Dave didn't. And she was like, "Are you going to camp this year?" And I'm like, "I don't know if I have a ride." And Peg goes, "You're going to camp. We're going to get you there one way or another." And she drove me to camp my last summer. And she also helped my family out in that regards to allow me to come back and volunteer for Main Idea between the years of 2012 and 2016 before I came full staff. And for that, I will be ever eternally grateful for that. And getting to meet them and interact with them before I met and knew what camp was a special experience because seeing them out and about the community and how much they helped out the town of Lovell and Freiburg as a whole really makes a lot of sense when I see the way that things work here, and I'm like, that's a Peg thing. That's something that's left over from Peg. I know it is. And then the ladies' circle at the church always was so wonderful to hear Peg get up. And the one time that she would say something was something to do with the ladies' circle, and it would be like, "Yep, we're all good," and then she would sit down. So seeing her speak in front of people was like 1, 2, 3, done. That's it. I think she had a counter on her head. It was 3 seconds up here, and I'm gonna sit down. And that was it. One last thing. In 2017, on my first year on staff, I didn't tell Dave or Peg that I was joining staff. And before that time, I had a beard. I still do grow a beard, but I shaved it for the very first time in probably like 4 years. Dave had grown used to seeing me with a beard at church every Sunday, and somehow Peg was the one that knew exactly who I was. Before she came down the hill, she looked at me, and she was like, and then Dave looks, and he's looking at me, trying to figure it out, looks at my name tag, he goes, and Peg goes, "See, I told you so." And they teamed up together and wrote me a letter saying how happy and proud they were that I joined staff. And, signed David and Peg Mason. And I read that letter from time to time still, and it's probably one of my most prized possessions. And I will be eternally grateful to both of them, but especially Peg, because she was the real driving force behind me getting to camp when I needed to be here, and just being one of the most impactful people in my life.
So when I came to camp in 1977, it's kind of an understatement to say my transition was not an easy one. I was very homesick. I was not finding it easy to connect with other campers here. I was 10 years old, and I wanted to be next to Peg in the office helping her more than just about anything you can imagine, right? Every time free time came up, which is of course the nemesis of a homesick camper, I didn't know what else to do, and I thought, I'll go to the office and I'll help Peg. She's always got something to do, it seems. And I can only imagine how Peg must have relayed stories to Dave and to the staff and whatnot about how am I going to find another nice way to turn Billy Auerswald around and get him out of the office and where he should be, which is figuring out how to figure out other boys, right? How to connect with camp. But God bless her, she was so persistent at that. She was firm in that, but she was loving and kind in that too. And I eventually got the message that while I wanted to help Peg, I was not going to be able to help Peg, and that I'd be out at camp. Like Bowman, I got to attend Keezer for several years, and I know Dave and Peg well enough to know that earning the ability to go be a staff member at Keezer for Christmas week meant that I had earned Peg's trust to come into a very select circle, and that's something I'll always be very thankful for.
One of our newest traditions at Council Fire is that, at the traditional Council Fire, there's some sort of story, a lion hunt, something like that happens. And one of the stories that I try to tell once every summer is sort of talking about one of the legends of Camp Agawam, because I think the way people are not forgotten is that you tell their stories. And so this summer it was Bob Bailey, but last summer it was Peg Mason, and she will certainly come up again maybe as soon as next summer, because I think it's really important that you tell people stories, and that's how they're not forgotten. And I think for Peg, up there, the important message from us, we noticed. We noticed. The lessons you taught us, we absorbed. You impacted so many, and you were loved. You are remembered. You're going to have hearts, and you will not be forgotten. And I think that's the message that we can give, and we can remember her. And even if she tried to go under the radar, she didn't. And that's obvious today, and hopefully that will be obvious in years to come. And with that said, I'd like to just take a moment of silence and reflect on Peg and the impact that she had on all of us as individuals. Thank you very much.